Hello and welcome, my name is Kyle FtW and welcome back to another Call of Duty Vanguard video. Today we are back with another top 5, and today we're going to be breaking down the top 5 worst maps within Call of Duty Vanguard. In my last video from last Saturday, I uploaded a video titled The Best Maps within Call of Duty Vanguard, and today we're going to be focusing on the worst maps, the maps that I don't like to play very much at all, that just aren't even close or even as good as the best maps that I made from last week. So again, we have 5 more of them here today, and without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this video. So I do have the same sort of requirements that I had in the last video: how long it takes to find enemies, the flow of the map, how well it plays, and everything of that nature. So again, from the top 5 from last week, where I mentioned all of the maps and how good they were and everything like that, with all the the flow and the design and everything like that. The worst maps are, you guys are going to definitely see a pattern here when I go through them. So again, this is all my opinion. Maps that aren't on this list are maps that are just kind of fit in between the top 5 best and then the top 5 worst. So starting off here at the number 5 spot as the 5th worst map within Call of Duty Vanguard, we have the map Red Star. Now a lot of you guys would probably think, man, why isn't this thing way up in the top, in the top 2 or as the worst map in the game? And honestly, it's weird because a lot of the maps that I'm going to be talking about here in this list are going to be maps that I really don't think that there's like a horrible map within Call of Duty Vanguard. Like, I don't think there's like any really F tier maps, I would say. I mean, I think that the maps are better than Modern Warfare. Are they better than Modern Warfare 2019, I should say? Are they better than Cold War's base maps? I'm not really sure, honestly. I think it's definitely a close battle, but I don't really see any Vanguard map as the worst map ever. So again, this is all subjective. More of this rating is just based off of how often I rage quit the map, how often I just don't want to play the map, how boring the map is. So basically, those are the 3 things that are determining this list. So again, number 5 spot, we have Red Star. Now, I don't really have too many problems with this map. Aesthetically, you guys know that it is one of my favorite maps within the entire game. The Eastern Front of World War II is super interesting, and you're basically playing in a Stalingrad square. And if you look at the outside of the map, you guys can see a whole bunch of destruction and rubble, and I just really like the design of Red Star from the perspective of its aesthetic, but it definitely is not a very good map. I don't think that it's the worst map in the game, but it's definitely not good. The biggest problem that I have with it is there's really 2 main camping spots. There's the building where the B objective is, and then there's over by the C objective. Those buildings are both very campy, and it's just slow gameplay sometimes. If you don't have a full 6v6 domination or more players on the map, it's just really slow paced, really boring, and that's why it's at the number 5 spot. But again, it's not the worst map in the game, in my opinion. There's definitely maps that are quite a bit worse. So jumping in here with the number 4 spot, we have the map Oasis. Now, I just don't like this map. It's just so campy. No one really moves on it. It's weird because the map design isn't too bad. It's a 3-lane map. It's sort of like a normal map from previous Call of Duty games, but for some reason, it is just very campy. No one really moves around it too much. There's a lot of camping spots. The 2 buildings on each side of the map that overlook the B objective. People just sit up there the entire time. And again, my biggest problem with Oasis is just how campy it is. It's just, it always blows me away when I play Oasis and realize how campy it is, because it's at its base design, it's like a normal good map as far as the design goes. It's got very similar sort of map design to maps like Eagle's Nest and Bocage, but it's very campy, and I think it's just maybe the players I play against on Oasis which make me not like it as much as the other maps in this game. But I do think that there's also a lot of head glitches and everything like that, which just make the map really campy, and overall I just don't really like it that much. Coming in at the number 3 spot, we have the map Berlin. Now, this is another huge map. I mean, my map guide video for this map was almost a half hour long because of how big the map is, how many destructible environments there are, and everything like that. And the core problem that I have with Berlin is it's just way too big. It's just way too big. I get bored when I play it, and I just don't, I just get really bored. I mean, each TDM game I've ever played on it is 10 minutes long. Domination games, I get maybe like 20 to 30 kills, not very many at all. And that's the biggest problem I have with Berlin. It's just very slow paced, very big, and that's one of the biggest problems with it. Because again, I don't really run into too many campers, and all the camping spots are very, very easily countered. But whenever I play Berlin, the map is just really, really long, and it's just very, very slow gameplay. And that's part of the reason that I don't like Berlin, and why it's at the number 3 spot. Why it's worse than Red Star and Oasis? It just comes down to the fact that it's just slower gameplay than both of those maps combined. It's just very, very slow. Yes, Red Star is actually faster paced than Berlin, which is why it's so low on the list. Now coming in at the number 2 spot as one of the worst maps, as the second worst map within Call of Duty Vanguard, we have the map Demeos. Now, I used to like this map. My first ever multiplayer gameplay on Vanguard was playing on Demeos, but for some reason this map, I just really don't like it at all. It's very, very campy, and I think part of the reason for that is that you can go on the roof of the church. If you couldn't go on the roof of the church and there was just the sort of clock tower overlook, then the map would be better. But because you can climb on the entire roof of that building and camp on it, it can make the game really, really unfun, really, really terrible and slow. And Demeos is just not a very good map in my opinion, design-wise. And it's all comes down to the roof. If you couldn't go on the roof, it would be much, much better. But because you can't go, or because you can go on the roof, the game is very, very slow pace on this map, and I just really don't like it. Another problem that I have with this is that the spawns are very, very unforgiving, which I get. Sometimes it's fun to be able to spawn trap the enemy team. But as far as playing the map goes and trying to have a good time on it, it is really, really not that fun. And that's one of my biggest problems as well, is that if you happen to spawn on the C objective, it's either the A or the C objective, and the enemy team is pretty good and knows what they're doing, you can be spawn trapped for the entire time. You can never leave your spawn, and I just really don't like Demeos. It's just so campy, and there's a lot of spawn trapping going on and head glitches, and it's just really not fun to play. The gameplay that you guys are actually seeing in the background of Demeos was one of my best games on that map. That's because I was using one of the easier weapons in the game to use with the bar. So in all reality, Demeos is not my favorite map, and I think that it definitely deserves the number 2 spot. Now coming in at the number 1 spot as the worst map within Call of Duty Vanguard. This was kind of a hard list because it's kind of hard to pick the worst map in the game for a couple of reasons. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I don't really think that there's an absolutely awful map within the game. And the requirements to be on the top 5 worst maps in the game had to be the fact of how often I rage quit, how boring the gameplay was, and everything like that, how campy the map is, and Desert Siege as my number 1 map takes that spot. I think that it is by far the campiest map in the game. I also think that it's one of the biggest maps in the game. The gameplay is boring and slow. I rage quit more times than I actually stay in the game on Desert Siege, and I just really don't like it. Again, the biggest problem with Desert Siege and most of the maps here on this list is that the 3 biggest maps in the entire game are on this list: Red Star, Oasis, Berlin, and Desert Siege. They just don't connect, with the community. They don't connect with me. They're just very, very campy. Desert Siege has so much stuff all over the place, which I like the realism to it. But again, when it comes to multiplayer, you can't have, a crashed train where there's a whole bunch of head glitches on there, mount positions on there. You can't have a whole bunch of stuff in the middle of the map that people can head glitch behind. And I overall just don't do very good on Desert Siege. There's a lot of head glitching going on. There's a lot of camping going on. There's really only one building where all the action happens. The rest of the map is kind of very, very desolate. And I just choose not to play Desert Siege. Whenever it comes up in the rotation, I instantly back out. That goes for a lot of these other maps here on this list as well. Red Star is the only map that I will stay and play from time to time. But Oasis, Berlin, Demeos, Desert Siege, I leave pretty much every time they come up because they're boring maps. They don't flow very well. And I think that Desert Siege definitely takes the cake as the worst map. But it's definitely close between Desert Siege and Berlin. But again, I think Desert Siege definitely takes the cake as the worst map. I was going to even put Das Haus on this list, not as the number 1 worst map, but I decided against that because, again, every map here is worse than Das Haus. But yeah, so anyway, guys, that is going to do it. Number 1, the worst map within Call of Duty Vanguard, in my personal opinion, is Desert Siege. But again, the top 5 list is very, very close. All the maps are not very good and everything like that. Now, I wanted to mention a few honorable mentions because it was kind of hard to pick the top 5 worst maps in the game, because again, I don't really have a problem with most of the maps within Vanguard, but there are 3 maps that definitely almost made this list, and yes, Das Haus is one of them. I also have Subpens as an honorable mention, and finally I have a map that I have in my honorable mentions is Numa Numa. but I couldn't put Numa Numa on this list because I like Numa Numa a lot. It's one of my favorite maps in the game, actually, believe it or not. I do really, really well on it. So it's hard to pick between those 3 honorable mentions, so I just decided to make them honorable mentions. And that pretty much only leaves Hotel Royal and Gavatu, and all the maps that didn't make the list and didn't make the list for the top 5 best maps. They're all just kind of mid-tier. Some of them are worse than others. Like, for example, Subpens is probably worse than Tuscan, but is better than Red Star. So, you know, they kind of, the rest of the 6 maps in the game that I haven't mentioned in this video kind of fit into the middle of this list. But anyway, guys, that is going to do it for the top 5 worst maps within Call of Duty Vanguard. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are about this video. Let me know what you guys think is one of the worst maps. I think Red Star was probably one of my more controversial picks, but I don't really have very many problems with it. But I know that a lot of people do, and a lot of people really, really hate Red Star. But to me, it's definitely not the worst map in the game. And I'm pretty confident with my list. It did take me a little bit to make this one because of how I feel about zombies, but I think that my decision was pretty dang good. But it was, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, like, I really appreciate it. If you want to check out my previous top 5 video from last week, we talked about the top 5 best maps in the game, and I really, really enjoyed making that video because we're talking about the best maps in the game. But you guys can feel free to check that out at the end of the video in the description. I'll see you guys all on another Call of Duty Vanguard video very, very soon.